Did you see that opening? That's not a bad change, right? I mean, we've had the same one going since we started for Gear Talks, the same opening. I figured something new isn't too bad. I think it looked pretty good. I thought it came together pretty well at the end of it all. Welcome, everybody, to another Gear Talk. It's Thursday. That means it's time for a Gear Talk. And I said I would have this with me more. I did it, and now I'm proud of myself. So, we're going to be talking about the next character in the Gabe's Convoy discussion series. And that just so happens to be our main antagonist for everything, Ukkon. Now, Ukkon is very interesting because this is not Ukkon's first appearance. This is not where his origins begin. All of that is a ways back. He actually started everything off with Mira. He was with Mira when the Locust first began. And not only that, in the Rise of Rom comics we do get to see all the leaders of the Locust. And one of them just so happens to be head scientist Ukkon. So, we're going to talk about Ukkon from his place of origin, his character in general, the Rise of Rom comic series, there we go, because we're going to need to talk about what he did there, and what is implied of what he did, and what we learn in tactics, and go on from there, and some interesting tidbits we have about the character. Starting off, it is important to talk about Ukkon and how he is involved with the Gabe's Convoy. Just starting off, he is our main antagonist. He is who we chase throughout the game, but it's a bit more complicated than that of what he is. He's not just your average Locust. He's not just a high-ranking one that came and rose through the ranks like we have for like Rom, Scourge, Karn. We don't have anything like that. He is a very interesting case on his origins. So he was originally, you're going to love this, a human. Ukkon was a human. He started off as a child. He was a part of the New Hope research facility when it first began, and he was basically Subject Zero. And that Patient Zero is the very first of the Sires. Not only was he once human, he is a Sire. He is the only Sire that we know of that has cognitive thought, that is able to control his bloodlust pretty much, and is still up and walking around during the events, at least, of the Locust War. We didn't have many at all. Most of them were locked away at New Hope or over at the Mount Kadar Research Facility, which we're going to get into both of those areas because both of them are heavily tied to Ukkon. And speaking of which, let's start off with New Hope. So, at one point when New Hope was open, they were researching a way to cure rust lung. Now, we don't know if Ukkon already had rust lung or if it was his family that had rust lung, but him along with his parents or just his father, we're not sure which, I don't believe. I know Mira's father was brought in, but I'm not sure Ukkon's parents or if it was just him, but he was brought in, and he was one of the first people that they tested out the genetic changing and introducing emulsion to the body. Now, when it was done to Ukkon, we don't know if he was lucky, his genetics were perfect for this, or what happened, or if they did a different formula, but we know that Ukkon, unlike all the other children that were experimented on, did survive, or at least not even survive. When he was turned, he was still himself. He mentally was still there. He was still having the thoughts that he originally had as a human. He was already there and being changed and worked on when Mira came in. So he was already there. Mira was the one that came in after him. So if you were to name, like, out of the Locust Council at the time of the Locust War, who was, like, the first to have their change and, like, become what they are, Ukkon would be the first, even though Mira became the leader of everything. But the experimentation was being done, and not only that, but his changes happened, and this was seen by a lot of other people who worked at the New Hope Research Facility, because the original form of it was, the goal at least, was we're going to cure rust lung. That's the goal. We're going to cure the rust lung and make it so that rust lung's not a problem anymore when it comes to mining emulsion. Zero issues. That was the goal. Now, Niles is a dick, as we've covered a lot in this series, or at least even in Gears in general. Niles is a dick. So Niles has the brilliant idea of, okay, we could find a cure. That's an option. But what if, stick with me now, everyone. Dr. Torres, stick with me on this. What if we turned them into superhuman soldiers, or even monsters that could win a war, and go from there? And then later on, he says, okay, guys, okay, we're changing the plan again. We're changing it again. What if we do all that stuff I just talked about, all that, but evolve humanity in general? What do you think? Now, on paper, maybe could kind of work. Niles wasn't the greatest fella. It did not work, and this was seen as like abominations, a crime against humanity pretty much, and a lot of scientists and a lot of personnel weren't fans. One of those personnel, which we'll get to later on in this story involving Ukkon, was a character by the name of Sid Redbird. Now, Sid worked as a guard. He worked there at New Hope. He was pretty much like, you know, he knew the information. It was a covert operation because it wasn't like public knowledge about New Hope. No one really knew about New Hope in general. He was stationed there. The things he saw, the things he experienced, he figured this is horrible. This is the worst thing I've ever seen. And he did have interactions with Ukkon a lot. Now, even in New Hope, after the changes happened with Ukkon and he became a Sire, it is stated that he did have a lot more bloodlust. He was a lot more vicious. There was a lot more like inner feelings of just anger and rage that he carried, like we see with many sires. It's just that he was able to kind of control it a bit. He still had his knowledge. He still had his willpower. So he was able to push those carnal desires back somewhat. And this led to him kind of being kind of a dick, because he would just egg on a lot of the guards or a lot of the people at the facility and pretty much just be like, mean. That's the best way I could put it. He was just an a-hole. So, one of these people, he would talk to Sid a lot and just kind of like just piss Sid off, or he knew about Sid. We don't know exactly how much of their interactions went on, but we do know that they knew one another. Now, after Sid left, he leaked some of the documents to the COG on what was currently going on, and at that point, they were shutting New Hope down, said, you're all getting out of here. Most of y'all are probably going to prison. Whatever's happening to these children, we're going to take care of that. Now, before everyone was sent out, because of, you know, the COG, obviously, crimes against humanity isn't a great thing. They decided, you know, get rid of the scientists, get rid of the people. But then a fringe group comes in, a third-party group, kind of like Cerberus from Mass Effect, comes in and says, hey, look, we're with the COG. Or at least we're an organization that sides with the COG. And we've seen what you're doing. Super soldier, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. That's kind of what we want to further the COG's agenda with this type of technology. We might be able to make something work. So, if you guys want to continue your research, there's a place in Mount Kadar you can head to. And there, you can continue doing this in secret. Not even the COG's going to know what's going on. You and your current employees, your scientists, your team, and even everyone you're working on, you can come on over here. So, obviously, Niles took the deal because, you know, he wanted to evolve mankind at this point. So, the one thing they didn't promise was transportation, because they figured if we give you transportation, you're going to be easier to track. So, we're going to have you, get this, everyone, you, the scientists, the test subjects, y'all are going to, not kidding, walk to Mount Kadar and go to the research facility there. Now, remember, a lot of these people are children, the ones being tested on, or at least have come into their teen years. So we're having all these people travel. And the official word from the COG is, that's what happened. Like, all these people walked to Kadar, were never seen again. That was the official story the COG went, because as far as they know, that's where the story ended. We also know that they did at least go and try and search for them to at least capture them or see what's going on. And they never did, because the Mount Kadar research facility was hidden very well. And again, like, you have the birth of the Locust happening, you're going to have to hide it somehow. So we make our way over to the Mount Kadar research facility, and this is when things kind of hit the shan. We have the situation we talked about in Reyna's video, how she was conceived by Dr. Torres and Mira. She pretty much escaped by Torres taking her out of there because he didn't want his daughter being tested on. And this led Mira to an uprising for the Locusts. Remember, Ukkon is here for all of this. Ukkon is still very aware of what's going on. He's aware of Mira. So all of this is going on, and it comes to pretty much the boiling point where Mira leads the revolution. Now, during this situation, we have her, we have Ukkon, we have the other Locusts, everyone pretty much except the matriarch, because she's still there, and we also have Srock. Now, Srock, we're going to have a video about him later on when we get into the Locust, but Srock was one of the original Locusts also. They're pretty much the leaders at the time. They're like the biggest, strongest, or smartest. They're leading this revolution. They completely destroy the lab. They have to pretty much just gas and freeze the place, but they are able to make it out and start Nexus. And that's where, as the Locusts, Ukkon's story begins as a Locust. When it comes to Ukkon and how he got his knowledge and how he was so smart, we don't really get an answer to any of that. The only thing we really get is how his regeneration works. Now, we'll touch on his regeneration and his knowledge before we get into the rest of his story, pretty much, because those do play a role coming up. In fact, this plays a role into what happened over at New Hope also, where they had to take precautions. So, Ukkon is not only a genius scientist, he picked up knowledge, I'm guessing, from the labs around all of them. He kept his human intellect, so he probably just picked up on all the knowledge. Not only that, he gained an ability from the emulsion, kind of like what Mira already had for her longevity. He gained the ability of very rapid regeneration. So how it works for him is that while Mira is living a very long life and extended pretty much and slowed, his goes by, if he's to be damaged, his physical body can repair itself on a very, very fast level. Like within seconds, he can heal an entire body part. For instance, just by the story of tactics, he's had his jaw blown off, he had his arm ripped off, he was skewered by 2 hooks that went right through his body, and he healed from all of it without a single problem. Nothing at all. He was completely fine. Now, this became such a big issue that the scientists saw originally when he was held over at New Hope and over at the Mount Kadar Research Facility, where they had to decide how are we going to deal with this, because this could become problematic. He could very much have the situation where physically we could unload bullets into him and he's fine because he's just going to heal. So how do we take care of this? And that's how the cytostatic gas was created. Now, it was a compound, 2 compounds mixed together to create a gas that could negate his healing for a limited time. They figured out this is what we need to keep him under control. This is like his limiter we have to put on him. So now that he's with the Locust, that's not a thing anymore. He can just regenerate as much as he wants. So you do get this feeling in tactics, at least when it comes to Ukkon. He doesn't really have a very high sense of preservation for his own life because, again, it's not a problem for him. He can heal. He's basically Wolverine and Deadpool. He's just going to heal. He's fine. Like, Deadpool does not care about his physical body because it'll just heal. It's not a problem. That's basically what Ukkon is. He does not care what happens because he knows he's fine. It's still going to hurt. He's still not a fan of it, but he understands I'm going to be okay. And there is one more thing he did receive from everything that happened to him. The only negative effect he did either before he was turned or after, he does have rust lung. So that does play a role into things, and that's something that does need to be accounted for when we're talking about how Ukkon functions on his physical well-being. On a physical external level, does not care. His rust lung, however, is something he has to look into because he can't repair what's already been damaged before he could regenerate. So it's still going through and killing him slowly. But anyway, we're going to get into that. Right now we need to talk about him with the Locust. So once they made their way into Kadar, created Nexus, and he was one of the founding members, he was pretty much given the head of science. He's the head scientist for everything. And his job is to better the Locust, pretty much. That's basically what he does. So while he's creating all of these other things, he's splicing creatures that serve the Locust, like the Brumok and Corpser were all his invention. The technology placed on them for the helmets and weapons, those were all created by him. Obviously the tickers, putting those canisters on, he probably created how to do that. That was all him. He was bettering and enhancing the Locusts on a fundamental level, pretty much when it came to science and engineering. That was all him. While all this is going on, we have the introduction of the Lambent. So the Lambent are a great thing to talk about in Gears because it's basically a parasite that lives throughout the planet, and as far as we can somewhat tell, they are sentient on a level with all the emulsion and Lambent around the planet, kind of, with how it kind of seems. So by what we see, they're basically like the Locust, except parasitic. So they are living in the Hollow too, because emulsion holds lambency, or you become lambent from emulsion. Lambency is what the parasite is, and they're at war with the Locust because the Locusts live underground now. The Lambent are already kind of living there. Every time something is killed, they take over the body. So as many Locusts that die, the Lambent take over. That's the issue, and the Lambent are fighting to have control and full supremacy. So the Locusts are on the defense every single day in the tunnels. They are fighting, they are trying to survive, and then in the Rise of Rom comic, we have everything come to a boil where we don't have a choice anymore. We either have to go and have a war with the humans and try and take the land above us, or we have to keep fighting the Lambent and probably die here because we don't have any other options. So Ukkon, during all this, it's very funny because Ukkon really, he cares, but he doesn't care. Because he's more invested in the scientific aspect of things. He wants to see what's going on. He's interested in, the idea of invading the humans, but also fighting the Lambent still and learning more from them. He's interested in all of this. So when Rom is finally confronting the Queen, Srock, and everyone on the council of, hey, we have a situation where we're not going to win. I've been, along with Scourge, so I mean we've been on the front line this entire time. I can tell you right now, we are losing ground every single day. We will not win. There's no way we can win this. And Srock says, don't be ridiculous. The honor of the Horde will win. You have Vrol, I believe, he is the leader of the Cantus at this point, is Vrol. It went Droke, then Vrol. So Vrol's in charge and says, we have the worms backing us, we'll be fine. And you basically have a few characters, very few, that are actually somewhat siding with Rom, but won't openly state it. For this, you have, like, the Queen, who is kind of like, I'm going to keep an eye on you and see if what you're saying is true. If it is, I trust your judgment, Rom. She doesn't openly say this, but this is, like, what she's putting Rom through. And Ukkon finds the idea of invading the humans interesting, and he can tinker around and play around with biology and the humans and see what happens. So his idea is kind of like, if we did invade, I find it for my own personal benefit we did that. So he somewhat kind of sides with Rom just for the idea of invading. That's why he sides, because he does understand if Rom is correct, if we are going to lose this war down here, we're all dead. Like, period. There's no more playing around with biology. We're dead. Period. So you have the situation where the council is kind of fractured. The people against are very vocal, while the people with are kind of keeping their mouths shut just to see what's going on. Now you have the situation later on where a corpser is sent out to attack Rom. It is originally thought that Ukkon was the one who sent everything. Ukkon is also against them, but you do learn that Ukkon is not against them. That was Srock's orders to send out a corpser. He did have sway enough in the council where he could just do it. And the majority of the council are just kind of against him. Like, why would you do that? You wasted a corpser. You not only did that, you attacked our own just to see if, like, a point was proven or to show something. Like, this was dumb. This was stupid. Especially Vrol. Vrol is like, this is high heresy, Ukkon, that you would even put machines on these glorious creatures, which Ukkon created. And Ukkon, which we learn throughout this, is either he does not believe in the Trinity or he is agnostic or atheist. We learn this, which makes sense because he was around before any of this. He was the original. He's like, I know what's real. I know these are just giant worms in the tunnel. I know that. I have been alive longer than any of you, except for Srock, maybe, and definitely Mira. Me and Mira are like the same age. I know for a fact these are worms. Whether or not it is religious, I don't give a damn. I got science, that's it. And that's how it is. Throughout the comic, they have a constant back and forth of religion versus science, which, if you think about it, is kind of like comparative to like how the real world works. We're not going to jump into that subject, but I just found it interesting that even for the Locust, that is a point of contention. What is really true? Religion or science? Fun fact. Fun little food for thought. Once all of this is kind of settled and like Rom understands like what's going on, we have Scourge going out to talk to Ukkon, where he's pretty much saying like, Ukkon, like, we know what you're doing. You're pulling humans from the surface, we've heard. We've heard you have a fighting pit for these human creations you're playing around with. We see that you're kind of tinkering with emulsion too. And Ukkon, literally his answer, you gonna try and stop me? That's it. Like, he's like, go ahead. Like, I'm a scientist. This is what I do. Bring it. But they do talk to him. Scourge does, at least. Rom is busy talking to Karn and figuring out that side of things, which that's a story for their stories. And also, Ukkon brings up to Scourge, like, hey, if you are going to be heading out soon, do me a favor. Tell Karn that I finished up the modifications on his little pet, that shibboleth of his. It's kind of finished. It's a rowdy one, it is. And they do relay it to him, and that's how Shibboleth got his repairs done, and he has his metal leg is because of Ukkon. But at the end of the day, Ukkon kind of makes a deal with Rom and Scourge. The deal being is like, hey, you have my support and my help with everything. My beasts are yours to do with what you want, but what I want in return is the humans on the surface I want dibs on taking some of those. You guys bring some prisoners down so I can play around and tinker with some things. Because Ukkon, we do learn, does have the ability to change humans into locusts. He's able to do that. So his idea is like, I can probably take some prisoners and buff our forces so we can attack the surface, make it a quick end, and then we can take over so we don't have to deal with the Lambent. That's kind of Ukkon's thing, but he's also doing it for funsies because he's like, I just want to play around. After all of that is done, E-Day begins. Rom and Scourge lead the surface charge while we have Karn over in Grozny attacking. During all of that, we have the situation where Rom goes against Srok in a final 1v1. Rom wins, and we know that Ukkon is not on the surface. It is stated he never went up to the surface at that time. He was not there during E-Day, but as the time and years progressed, he would poke his head up now and then to kind of just look around, scout, see what's going on, and see what he was interested in and what kind of machinery or tech the humans had that he could play with. Once all this is pretty much come to light, this is when Prescott creates a covert operation for a Mr. Gabe Diaz to go in with a squad or whatever he has on hand to go in and take out Ukkon. At this point, they figure out everything. Prescott has an idea of what's going to happen, and this leads into the events of Gears Tactics when Gabe and Sid have to go through and take out Ukkon. Now, during all of this, too, like, they have to recruit people, they have to figure out how to get to him. All of this is done. Prescott just says, here's the mission. Gabe, you have experience in these kind of covert things. You're in charge. Figure it out. Which doesn't sit well with Gabe. But we have Ukkon, who at the time is in Tyrian soil. He's pretty much up topside. And he's pretty much just going around, like, again, just looking for things to do. Basically, that's what he does. He's just having funsies. That's all he's doing. So he's there playing around with a few things, learning. And also, we should state, during all of this, Rustlung is still a thing. Keep that in mind for a few moments. Now, while he's going around pretty much taking captives, taking prisoners, killing humans, this is when he takes his shot to the mouth that Michaela leaves him, and we see his healing for the first time where everything just grows back. He's perfectly fine, and he unleashes his Brumach among Gabe's convoy. Once all of that is done, he makes his escape. He leaves. Gabe and his crew figure out we're not strong enough to take him on. We can't beat him. We have to leave and retreat so we can take him on later. They leave to Vaskar. Just so happens, Ukkon was heading in the same direction. Go figure, right? So Ukkon also heads to Vaskar. So we talked a lot about, like, in Michaela's video. We're going to talk about it in Sid's, Marcy and Tyrone's, Gabe's. We're going to talk about, like, they went and their focus was to train and get stronger and ready. Ukkon, however, was taking a different path. He went there because he was looking for, you would never guess, something to help with his Rustlung. Now, the reason I bring Rustlung up so much is because it's a very prevalent thing with Ukkon. Even though he can physically heal, like we said, internally he's still having some problems. Now, if he got shot in the heart, his heart would still heal. But Rustlung is something that kind of just stayed. Like, he can heal, but the Rustlung is so severe with him, everything's kind of plateaued and slowly going down. Very slowly, but enough where it's a problem, where he understands, I'm going to die if I don't take care of this. What is Ukkon's plan, you may ask, to cure it? Well, I have an answer for you. We brought it up in the Vaskar video, actually. They're heading to the Nadroma Health Institute. Now, Nadroma, like we said in Vaskar's video, was a place where the people of Vaskar were also trying to figure out a cure for Rustlung. Now, theirs was probably a little bit more public with how we see, like, the setup is and everything. They were focusing on more of a medicinal way to heal it, while the COG were working on a genetic way to heal it. So, what they found was a way that could pretty much like limit it or like stop it to a certain extent, and it was only temporary. This would involve injections or a gas, as we see Ukkon practice with, and this is something where it did help Ukkon, but it doesn't fix Ukkon. So Ukkon saw this as, I need as many canisters as I can get, and because of the fact that he was traveling throughout Vaskar still at the time, he would leave the canisters behind, and this is how Gabe and his crew were able to figure out what he was kind of doing. So after all of this goes on, we also have a situation over on Gabe's side where Sid, we learn later on in a few moments, is kind of a traitorous bastard. But anyway, we have it where Ukkon is also still trying to look through. He's traveling, and radio contact goes off because they're listening to the radio feeds. They learn that, hey, there's a shipment of this stuff, the medicine I need, being sent out and packaged up in another part of Vaskar. I need that. Little does he know that this is Gabe's plan. They're going to hear it, and they're going to ambush him and kill him right there. He gets prodded right through the chest. So he's got 2 spikes going through. His guard that are with him, they get killed by Gabe and his crew. And this is when we learn, hey, how's it going, Sid? It's been a while. Nice to see you're doing fine. I'm still alive too, you a-hole. Basically, that's how it goes. So this is when Sid kind of turns the tables, and his plan is to take Ukkon, and he's going to parade him through the cog and state this is what the cog was aiming for. They were creating the monsters. The Locusts were made by the cog. So, screw the government. That was his plan. Again, Sid still held that grudge from all that time ago, which he's right to in my mind. The problem is that there's a lot of internal squabbling going on. Ukkon is able to pull himself free, and he also loses his arm at that moment. So he gets free. His chest heals, grows his arm back, and he brings a corpser out to take on everybody. Now, the corpser ends up dying. Gabe takes care of it, but he's able to make his retreat. Now, after he makes his retreat, we also learn that he has found pretty much a stronghold that he set up in one of the laboratories. Now, we don't know at what time frame this portion happens, if he already had it, or if he found it and they founded it there. But we also know that this is where scientists were hiding out, stranded, all of these different people. He finds it there, kills all of them. Just so happens his old buddy Dr. Torres is there, which I'm sure he had a bone to pick or two with Torres, and kills all of them. The only person he does not kill is Reyna. Reyna is also there, and Ukkon at this point has to know who Reyna is, like we said in Reyna's video, because it's like, you've known Mira all this time, you've been sentient this whole time. It's like, yes, you are obviously the daughter of my queen. Like, no duh, I'm probably going to keep you alive. Of course. So he pretty much puts her in as a prisoner, takes the necklace off of her, the medallion, probably going to bring it to Mira when he's done with his stuff to say, hey, your daughter's alive, I have her. And while he's out, pretty much taking care of the medical situation, the gas situation, Reyna does escape. Now, Reyna does escape. The issue is that Reyna is not at this level of her life, a peak survivalist like we've talked to. She understands, but it's like she gets ambushed by Locust, she's going down. So she gets caught again. This time, Ukkon's not there. So the Locusts catch her and put her in a torture chamber where she can die, where she could be transformed, brought in as a slave, anything. Ukkon does not know about this, because obviously, he'd have to see, hey, don't kill her. That's when Reyna gets saved by Gabe and the rest of the crew. Once she is saved, that's pretty much, I've lost your daughter, Mira. It's a good thing I haven't told you about any of this yet. But this leads into the final conflict later on when they figure out everything. They are able to create cytostatic gas again because, again, Sid was there at New Hope. He knows what the gas is. Michaela, who's a part of that group, she's able to work with the chemicals and make it. So you have the situation where they hit him with the gas. He can no longer heal. In the final fight, he whips on top of a Hydra and goes for a ride with that thing. One of the hardest fights in all of Gears of War, I will say right now, is against that damn Hydra. I started doing this a little bit past 6:30. It is currently right now 5:37 in the afternoon. After the camera died and I did everything and I accidentally fought everything again, which you have been watching, of course. 7 times it took to fight, having to restart because of all the damage I accumulatively would take and hold on to with my character. So I had to keep restarting. But you do defeat the Hydra, and then pretty much they're holding them dead to rights, and they're saying, we're going to kill you. We're done. You have caused enough damage. And then he starts retorting back, just screw you, my creations will live on. Mid-sentence, Reyna comes in, blows him in the head with a snub pistol, and that is the end of Ukkon. But not the end of his legacy. What legacy, you ask? Well, here's the thing. Everything that he created is still around. It's not like the moment he's dead, all of his creations are gone. No, it doesn't work like that. Again, he worked with their genetics, he worked with their engineering level of things, their biology, all of that he worked on. So for instance, the Brumoks that are still around, they're not just going to die, they're still around and fighting. He perfected the Brumok and the Corpser before the events of Tactics. He perfected it and he made them. He even gave them the ability to reproduce. That's why you can see baby Corpsers. He gave them that ability. So it's not like they just run out of Corpsers and Brumoks now. No. He made sure that was taken care of. Hydras are an issue, though. There's not a lot of Hydras. He made the Hydra. It is stated, I believe, if I think about it, it's very rare one can happen in the wild, but Hydras are a possibility because of emulsion. But yes, he was also behind, I can make artificial, pretty much Hydras. So he did that. All the technology that the Locust have, they still have that. You know, the disciples and zealots are still around. It's not like, oh, we're dead now because the boss is dead. No, they're still kicking and they're around. You know, there's not a lot of them. He did not perfect that. When it came to that section of it all, he was at that point working on it. He did not finish that. Those were probably all prototypes or something he was very close to finishing, but he didn't. So he did not have a lot. But yeah, that happens. All of those creatures. Right now with the Swarm, for instance. Think about this. The Swarm, we have Swarmox. They would not exist if it wasn't for Ukkon. He pretty much created the original spawn that created all of that. So he did that. We also have in the books, when Kate is learning more about Gabe, she comes across Hoffman, and Hoffman tells her, like, hey, you know, I didn't know your dad well, but I knew him. He was a nice guy. Didn't know a lot of the things he did. He did some covert stuff, I know. Also, don't forget the name Ukkon. And that's basically a lead-in for tactics because it's like, it's never really brought up again for anything. But yeah, he does tell Kate, like, be aware of Ukkon. And Kate kind of just, like, makes sure to remember the name, but nothing comes of it. So there you go. Other than that, yeah. What else to talk about for Ukkon? Like, he was one of the, like I said, one of the original council members for the Locust. He helped create the Locust pretty much because it was Mira, him, Droll, and Srock were the heads of everything. Later on, like, he kept his position up until he died. It's not like anything bad happened to him. He was very well known amongst all the Locusts. He was the scientist, the mad scientist. And yeah, he did have combat capabilities. He was able to fight. We know that from multiplayer. He had his own armor set. We never get to see it, though, in the original story. So for all I know, maybe he just kept it for ceremonial reasons. Like, that was it. Like, he's like, I'll wear it once, but I don't need it after that. Again, he is the first Sire. He is Patient Zero. That's about it. Like, that's Ukkon. Like, very interesting character, Ukkon. Like, not a lot of the Locust characters that are, like, high standing had a lot of, like, huge, grievous superpowers. Like, his was regeneration. Mira's was, like, longevity. Rom was controlling the krill, which we still never get a background for how that happened. It was interesting. It's like, this is a very, very dangerous Locust. If it wasn't for the cytostatic gas, he would be a very, very big problem. So yeah, at least Raina and Gabe took care of that. So yeah, that's going to do it. I want to thank everyone for watching. I want to thank everyone for making this possible. Thank the patrons for making this possible. The next video, we're just going to do another like little side thing before we get back to characters. And yeah, if anyone saw that little update video I did about like creativity and everything, know that I'm going to be putting more effort into things from here on out for the videos, not just trying to like release them to fit a schedule like I have been. For this video, I'm going to put a little bit more work, but not too much. I want to start all of that once May hits. Just finish up April like we have, and then just go really heavy into things once May comes around. So thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Later!